Hi, and welcome to Your Inside Power, where I help women to discover the confidence that they can really have inside of them and to increase their ability to earn money, to be more productive, and to gain time and money freedom and quickly get results. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most common misconceptions of success. And that is that your success is determined by your background or the circumstances that have happened to you, your experiences that you've had in life. And let me tell you that this couldn't be further from the truth, because you have the ability inside of you to achieve greatness, and it isn't shaped by your hereditary background or your environment. It's determined by what you're thinking inside your head, and it's determined by the choices you make to use the power that you have within or to allow these outside circumstances to control you. You know, I know how this can happen because I remember my mom often talking, when we were kids. Grew up in a very middle income household, and probably early on, it was probably lower middle income. And I can remember my mom, if my brother or I were asking for something, that she would say, well, who do you think we are? We don't live over there on the other side of town. So our house was on this hill on one side, and then on the other side of town was a hill where a lot of wealthy people lived, people that were definitely in that upper income. And so she would compare us to that. And, where did she get that? Well, I'm sure she got that from her mother, because my grandmother was very much like that, always comparing herself to other people and what other people had. I look at my husband's mother. She was that way. Perhaps it was a generational thing. I don't know. But you can't compare yourself to what others have, because what others have does not control your life. You're in control of your life. And if you want to create a better life, you just have to look yourself in the mirror and determine that you're going to create the life that you want. So hereditary background, environmental background does not control you. Many people do believe that. And, in societies where they're very much a class society, that tends to control where people think they can go. And if you look back in history, at one time, that was very much part of our lives. How did we get that? Well, because that's what our ancestors knew. And, from there, that's why we have some of these generational thought patterns, because at one time that was the case. Wherever your parents were born in life, that's pretty much where you were. And like I said, in some cultures, that's still the case, but it doesn't need to be. And we have evolved out of that. So whether, that whole idea is coming from the generational thought or from, there's history or limited success ideas of the past, we are bound to repeat a lot of those patterns if we don't change our thinking. And it's up to us to determine what our thinking is and to decide that we're not going to let the hereditary or generational thought process to keep us from achieving the greatness that we so desire. So as Wallace D. Wattles says, no one is born without the ability to grow mentally. Well, what does that mean? You see, we have the ability, no matter what your IQ is, you can still grow based on where your IQ is. And it takes some ability and it takes some guidance, perhaps, to figure out where it is you need to grow. My whole adult life, I pretty much spent in personal development, and I love personal development, which is probably why I'm doing what I'm doing today. But I've always been so fascinated by how you can really change who you are and change your thinking by reading books, by going into deep thought. And, I was just reading a section yesterday, and it was talking about reading alone is not going to change a lot of your habitual thinking. You have to think about what you read. It's the thinking that you do that changes, not just the reading, because we can all read something and not get anything out of it. And that's why I often tell my clients, when I suggest that they look at something or study something, to really study it, not just read through it. And there are certain books I'll give them and I'll say, don't read this book, study this book. Don't go through it like you have to finish it within a week or 2 weeks. That's not the point. It's reading it and then provoking your mind to think. And that's what we have to do, because when we can develop our thinking, we can become somebody different than who we are today. Now, this doesn't mean that no matter what your circumstances are that you were born into, that you have to stay there. You have the power and perhaps even the obligation to learn more and to get yourself out of where you are, or where maybe you were, the circumstances you were born into. And you have the ability to do more, to be more, to have more. You have that. But you have to become aware of the power that you have inside of you, and the power that is in some of these books that I read and that I recommend to clients, and that I would certainly recommend to you also. But becoming aware that you have this power is the first step. Awareness is everything. It is absolutely everything. And the more aware you are, the more you allow your mind to gather in this information and start to think about it, not just read it, but think about it, the more you become aware. And you start to realize that we often tell ourselves stories, and these stories aren't necessarily true. And yet we allow those stories to continue in our minds. Yes, we've inherited certain traits. And as they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. We have inherited those traits, but we can overcome them with focused attention and being intentional about what we're doing, and with practice. So we don't have to stay where we are. So if you don't like the circumstances that you are in currently, you don't maybe like the circumstances that you grew up in, you have the ability within you to change. And that's what I want you to understand. That's what your inside power is all about. You have it inside of you to make the changes. Now, do you often need guidance? Yeah, probably. But you see, you can unleash the potential that you have inside of us, or inside of you. You have the ability to become who it is that you desire to be. Who do you really want to be? What do you want to be? What do you want to have? What do you want to do? You get the choice to decide. We have been given the highest intelligence available to any animal in the animal kingdom, and we've been given that ability to choose. And we need to choose wisely, because every choice we make has a consequence. Now, sometimes when we choose to step out and to do something different, sometimes, I'm not going to kid you, sometimes you might lose friends, you might lose relatives, because they don't want you to be different. They want to keep you stuck, just like your subconscious mind wants to keep you stuck. But you get to decide what you want to do. And I think one of the saddest things, my son was telling me this story. For those of you who do not know, my son moved to Japan for his job in May. And I don't like the fact that he's there, maybe because I miss him. I'm very close to him. And, I miss being able to see him, be able to give him a hug, being more part of his life when he's halfway around the world. But I never discouraged him. And he knows that. He knows that I kept saying, I'm happy for you. I'm sad for me, because that's the way I felt. Well, he was telling me he had a coworker that he had worked with in a job they had here in the States, and she had wanted to go for a job in another foreign country in Europe. And so he got her this interview, and she had the interview and she got the job. And honestly, at this point, I don't know if she accepted it because her family was so upset with her and they wanted nothing to do with her. And how sad is that? You see, we have to live our own lives and we have to be able to choose for us what we want. We can't allow others to determine our success or to determine who we become. We have to think for ourselves. And you have the ability to become who you desire to be. You need to decide who that person is. And the talents and abilities you were born with, they can be expanded and enhanced. Now, I remember being on a seminar one day, and this person says, some people say you can be whatever you want to be. And she looked at herself and she said, there's no way I'll ever be a professional baseball player. And I thought, okay, I get the points you're making, but chances are she never really wanted to be a professional baseball player. Like that thought probably never entered her mind. So let's just be honest about that. And, think about what it is you want to do because you have the talent and ability, or you wouldn't be given the idea. I don't think she ever had the idea of being a professional baseball player. She was just using that as an example as you can't be anything you want to be. Well, your mind will tell you and you'll get these ideas. So whether it is that you want to be an athlete or musician or entrepreneur, you've got current skill levels to do that now. And that's just the beginning because you can grow and expand. That's the whole idea that Wallace D. Wallace is talking about. You have an obligation to learn and to grow. And it takes more than just wishing for greatness or to wish to be somebody different or to do something different. It also takes focused action. And where you end up in life has nothing to do with where you began or your hereditary or your circumstances that you are currently in. It has nothing to do with where you're at. I think of this, heredity impact. I was a third generation educator. Three of my four, no, I guess all four of my grandparents were really educators. My mom and dad were educators, and I became an educator mostly by default. I didn't know what else to do. And you see that trend happening in families that children will often go into the same occupation as parents. And again, that's a generational thing. Back in the 1800s, if your parents, your dad had a skill, maybe he was a blacksmith, chances are when you were very young, you were learning how to be a blacksmith and you would eventually take over his shop. So, it was very common that we tended to live the kind of life that maybe we were familiar with from our parents. But what sets us apart today is that we can do anything we want to do. And the world is so much, even though it's smaller in many respects, it's so much more open to us. The opportunities I see that my children have had are so vastly different than the opportunities I had. And so we can rise above where we are, and we don't have to stay stuck or stay in what's familiar. And see, the universe is designed, the whole idea of the universe is designed for growth. Look at it in nature. Nature is for abundance and growth. And that's what we're supposed to do. And when you start to take action towards what it is that you want, the whole world will start to align and to help you to make that happen. So this is what I often tell my clients early on. I want you to make a list of all the things you want to do, all the things you want to be, all the things you want to have, and just let your mind go wild. Don't put limitations on it. Don't limit your thinking at all. It doesn't mean that you're going to go after all those things, but what would you like? And just go wild with it. And make this list and put them in those three areas: things I'd like to be, things I'd like to do, things I'd like to have. And as you do that, you see you're sparking the universe that you want growth and you want to do something new. And so ideas are going to start to come to you. Now, once you've put those 3 lists down, then go back and find the one on each list that's more important. What's the most important thing on that list? And here's the thing. A lot of times, if you figure out what's really important, what you'll start to realize is, well, if I get this, then I'll probably already get this and this and this, and it'll all come along, because that's very common. And then you have to decide, okay, if this is what I want to do, what kind of training or support do I need? And if you have any question about that, please reach out to me, and I would be happy to walk you through that and help you to really hone in on what it is that you want. And that becomes really important, because without that realization or without that help, sometimes we just get those ideas, but then we just allow them to dissipate because we don't know what to do next. And that's a shame. So I don't want to see anybody having that happen to them. So please reach out to me if you are in need of some mentorship and you want to figure out, you can book a free consultation with me. I'll help you figure all that out. The first thing we need to do is become aware. And this is how we become aware. We first make some lists. We first think. Remember, the thinking spurs the action. And that thinking helps us to solidify who we are, who we want to be. So it starts with the awareness. And that's the first step you need to take. And that's a key. Awareness is key to overcoming some of those habitual thoughts that are in your subconscious mind and those patterns that we have that are generational. And those patterns are likely holding you back. And the habits we have are stored deep within our subconscious mind, but they control everything about us. Your subconscious mind controls everything that you do, the way you walk, the way you talk, the way you act. And the only way you can shift it is by changing your thoughts of who you are. I was just today, before I came up to do this show, I was getting some lunch and so on. And I noticed my posture was a little different. I was walking a little straight. I was carrying my body differently. And I thought, isn't that funny? Because the image I'm holding in my mind of who I want to be has that posture. And you see, it was becoming very natural. And why was it becoming natural? Because that's who I want to be. And that's where my focus has been. And with that awareness, you can identify those kind of traits that you need, or those things that will help you to develop new habits that will help you reach those goals that are the ones that you want. And how do you do that? Well, you take spaced repetition. How did you learn anything? You learned it through spaced repetition. How did you learn what your name is? Well, your parents would say it to you over and over. And eventually you pick up on the idea, oh, when that name is called, they're talking to me. You see, it's spaced repetition. And any of those thoughts that you have, any of those limiting beliefs we have also been put in there by spaced repetition. My mom talking about the people living on the other side of town, on the other hill in town, that was told over and over. And so I became to develop the idea that some people are more affluent and they don't live where we live. They live on the other side of town. And so you start to pick up on that. Well, how do you change it? The same way it was put in there, spaced repetition. If you want to change who you are, change the image of who you are, you have to keep thinking about it. And then one day, like I did today, you're going to say, oh my gosh, I must have changed enough of that I can see the difference in who I am. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's going to take time, and we don't know how long it's going to take. You see, there's a time to sow and a time to reap, and they're not in the same season. If you think of a farmer planting his crops, and when he harvests, he'll do them in the same year, but not in the same season. And so we don't know how long it's going to take. Think of yourself like a bamboo plant. You can plant bamboo and you fertilize it, you water it, you take care of it. and doesn't seem like it's doing anything, then all of a sudden it just starts growing and growing. That's the way we are. We have to prepare ourselves. We have to get ready to do something. And then all of a sudden, things will start to come together when you've learned enough. And that's why study becomes so important. So when we set a goal, that's the date that we think we're going to achieve it is only a guess. We don't really know because we're not aware of all the things we may have to learn in order to accomplish that goal. And so it's going to take some time. It's going to take some study. It's going to take some hard knocks. There's going to be times when things are not going to go well. And then you just look at them as an opportunity to learn so that you can expand your thinking and to grow further in life. And so this whole process takes time. It takes work. It takes practice. And often you do need some help of a mentor, of a coach. And that's when that mentorship becomes really important because we don't often see in ourselves what others see in us. And a mentor can help you see the blind spots or the things that you're missing or the things you don't realize about yourself. I remember early on in my teaching career, I had a principal and he would assign me to leadership positions. And I was basically the youngest person on my team, and I was in charge of them. And I felt very uncomfortable about that because I didn't have a self-image that made me aware that maybe there's some traits and things. But he and I would have conversations, and he was my mentor. He was my boss, but he was also my mentor. And I appreciate everything he ever did for me. And what I started to realize was that he saw in me what I did not see in myself. You see, my parents were both leaders, and I could see them as a leader. I could see my brother as a leader. I did not see myself as a leader. I saw myself as a follower, but he saw traits in me, and he helped me find those blind spots and guided me so that I had the ability to be a leader. And you see, the more you grow in any awareness, whatever the awareness is, the more you gain control of your life and the more things you find that you're able to do. But sometimes that takes somebody else to see it. And that's what I do when I work with clients. I help them find the awareness and give them ideas as to how to change and how to keep them accountable and how to keep them moving forward. Because I don't want you just to learn. I want you to get results. I really, that's the main focus on my business is to get people results. So it's all about following universal laws. I'd never heard about the universal laws until about 10 years ago. And this is so powerful to understand that the universe is working for your growth. And it's not working against you. However, you've got to feed it with the right information. Just like if we don't feed our bodies with the right food, we don't feel well. If you don't feed your mind with the right information, you're not going to have the growth that you could, or you're going to have an experience that you really don't want because you're allowing your thoughts to think negative instead of thinking the thought that you do want. And so you will attract yourself that thing you do not want. So when you begin to move towards what you want, you have to believe that you can achieve it. And that belief has to be faith that it will happen. Because if you start to walk towards what it is that you want, but in your mind, you're not believing you can have it, then you won't get it. You can't look at a coin. You can't look at both sides of a coin at the same time. You cannot look at your goal with saying, this is what I want. And then on the other side saying, I don't think I can get it. Because that's confusing. So when you start to think right, the universe will arrange everything around you to support you on your journey. And God, higher power, source energy, infinite intelligence, whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to believe that is, that connection with something bigger than you. Just be aware that it wants you to grow and succeed. It is wanting you to reach out and to develop that awareness and make a connection. Nature and society and even people around you will help you as long as you obey the universal laws. And if you don't know these laws, it doesn't mean you can ignore them. You have to become aware of them. And when you apply that power within yourself, it doesn't matter if you started with a little bit, or it doesn't matter if you face really tough times and circumstances, you can rise above where you are. Here's my experience and what happens. As you stay focused on what you want and you concentrate, you begin to see things shifting in your life. And as those shifts happen, small ones, even something very small, it's an indication that the universe is trying to help you. That source energy, God, is waiting there for you. And even when things are not going well, it doesn't mean that it's time to move on to something different or forget about it or say, oh, I quit. It just means there's probably a better way. And the universe has to let you know this isn't the path. It's just not the path you need to be on. So in concluding, the only limits to your success are the ones that you set for yourself, the ones you impose on yourself. Your hereditary, your background, your circumstances have nothing to do with determining who you become in the future. What matters is your mindset. And that's why mindset is so important. And people don't understand how important your mindset is, because your mindset will determine the actions you do. And when you act with intention, things shift, and your ability to harness and to start to gain what it is you want increases. One of the problems is that people don't know this information. I certainly didn't. And I remember sharing this with my son, because if you don't know a story, go back to another episode where I talk about my son and how he manifested a scholarship. I didn't understand any of this. And I remember one day he said, boy, I wish I'd known this about 15 years ago. He was probably 25 at the time, so when he was 10, I said, are you kidding me? I wish I'd have known it like 40 years ago. What a difference it makes in your life when you understand this. And see, when you understand that, you realize that you're in control. And when you allow the world or those around you to control you, that's when things get out of hand. So if this message is resonating with you, I invite you to take next action on your journey to your future and follow the link. Connect with me on social media, and you'll see links to workshops that I have or challenges where I can help you to develop the confidence and the mindset and sometimes the business skills that you need to unlock your full potential and to remember greatness is your birthright. So let's go ahead and let's claim that together, and allow me to help you with that.